Welcome to the November 14th Village Board public meeting. This meeting is now called to order. We'll begin with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Do we need to take attendance officially?
I can, just quickly, if it's okay.
Okay. Please, sir.
Trustee Bazemore?
Present.
Trustee Codman?
Present.
Trustee Herrera? And Mayor Garrity.
Present.
Uh,
Before we get into the budget
Yes.
hearing, should we do our announcements, or should we do that after?
Why don't we do the, you can do the announcements, go right ahead. Do the announcements, then we can go into the public hearing right away.
So we're about to get into our discussion about budgets. I do have a couple of just housekeeping items, and then I want to comment on the budgets. Does anybody else have any announcements that you want to bring up? Things, calendar items, please, John.
Yeah, I want to let everybody know that tomorrow night's Organ Groove is canceled. We're expecting some pretty nasty weather tomorrow afternoon, so thanks for those that have been coming, and we will pick it back up December 6th, and also we're having a special solstice December 21st event for it's a Friday night actually, Organ Groove, so that'll be fun. Also this Saturday we have Itagaro Brandero trio, a Brazilian jazz combo that's really going to be quite exciting. That's at the Jazz at the Lodge this Saturday at 7:30. Feel free to go to jazzatthelodge.com if you're interested in coming. Please you can text me, or you can also reserve a space online. So that's this Saturday, 7:30, Jazz at the Lodge, Brazilian jazz trio. Thanks.
Yes, I have one, and the second one I need Jamie's help with. So the first one is holiday season kickoff. Believe it or not, Thanksgiving's next week. So
It's on.
it's on.
Is it not audible?
Am I good? Oh, I am. Okay.
Oh God.
That was not.
The holiday season's being kicked off by our very own Down to Earth Markets. Their holiday season kickoff. It's going to be this Saturday from 8:30 to 1 p.m. And there's going to be live music and caroling, as well as performers and special vendors. And then I heard, but I don't have the information on me, that the Austin Bucks program is being launched on Saturday morning. I just don't have the event details on me.
Oh, we heard that as well. Although,
I should have gotten it.
we aren't quite ready yet for that. The chamber has been going around and asking vendors, businesses, if they want to be a part of this program this year, and so they are gathering the list of people that are participating so that it can be printed on the back. There were going to be some minor changes to the front, mostly just where to get more information if they wanted it, and changing the dates. But then we're also doing a mock-up for half of them being printed in Hispanic and half in English, and so I'm not we haven't seen the draft yet, so I understand, but we haven't seen the document, so I'm not really sure where they're at with that.
I don't know. I was just told.
As soon as we know,
Saturday,
we'll let you know.
But if you could post it, that'd be great.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll start with tomorrow, because the Ossining Documentary and Discussion Series is tentatively planning to have a really terrific program tomorrow called Plastic Paradise. And I had a radio show discussion today with one of our panelists, who is the education director for the Clearwater, the Hudson River Sloop. And her specialty is in microplastics. And it really well, this film focuses on the giant garbage patch in the Pacific Ocean. We will be able to have a discussion that really takes it into what can we do here as individuals, as a municipality, in our own community. Things like a plastic bag ban, like plastic straws. Those bans are happening all over the country and all over the world. We wouldn't be trailblazers at this point, and it's something that has been happening in surrounding communities. The county has considered legislation. It's been stop and go. I'm not sure where it is right now. I don't know if you have any insights that I don't.
Stop and go from what I know.
Okay.
It's still there.
Okay. So meanwhile, municipalities are considering that. It's a really powerful film. I hope that it happens tomorrow. If the weather doesn't materialize as most feared, and the library stays open, then chances are we'll have the program. So if you are interested in coming, I encourage you to please pay attention to what's going on with the library. If the library closes, clearly the program is off. If you're on Facebook, that's the easiest way to keep updates on if anything gets canceled. If it goes off, if it happens, it'll be at 6:30 p.m. At the Aspen Public Library. As always, it is free to the public to participate. Also related to weather and storms, after our last storm, we finally saw the majority of the leaves fall and drop, and so everyone has sort of piled up their leaves and would love for them to be vacuumed up. And in some neighborhoods, they were taken away by Public Works today, and in some neighborhoods, they will be taken away in the morning. Chances are the whole village will not be covered before the snow falls, but I know they're working on that, and then they'll transition probably right into storm management. So they'll be busy tomorrow. And there are a couple of items on the calendar that are really, really terrific community organization programs that are coming up this Friday at the Bethany Arts Community. They're having their annual fundraiser, so that's this Friday, November 16th. To learn more about that, you can check them out online or on Facebook at the Bethany Arts Community. And then the Sing Sing Prison Museum is having their Sing Sing Swing this Sunday, and it is aboard a boat that leaves from Yonkers and rides up the river just like the boat used to do, but instead of taking people to prison, it takes people on a really, really lovely dinner and dancing. So it's a little different. It's a really fun event. It's a fascinating project. If you'd like to learn more about it, I encourage you to visit the Sing Sing Prison Museum website and learn about the mission and the principles of the project, because it is something about the history of the museum, but it is largely about criminal justice and becoming a center for justice and helping people to understand the experience of not just the folks who are incarcerated, the families of the victims, the folks who work there, and how we handle criminal justice in our society overall. It's a pretty fascinating project, and I'm grateful that the village is involved in making that and moving that forward. Their fundraiser is this Sunday. You can learn more about that on their website, singsingprisonmuseum.org, or on Facebook as well. Okay, Rika, did you have any community announcements before we get into the budget public hearing?
No, thank you.
Okay, then I will just get people up to speed, and then I'll turn it over to the manager, and she's going to do a nice presentation for us, and then we'll hear from the public. Last night, we had our first budget meeting. We talked about debt service, and we talked to Paul Fraioli and Andy Teese about Public Works and their budget. The budget that Debbie is about to present to us, Manager McDonald is about to present to us, is her proposed budget, and she and her staff have spent months working on this and bringing it to this point. In the general fund budget, about 75% of what's in there is related to personnel. It's salary and benefits. And about 25% of it is other things, like, are we going to invest in capital projects? Are we going to, we certainly have debt that we need to pay from ongoing capital projects. Are we going to purchase more equipment to be able to do more of this work? That's a lot of what we're talking about. And last night, it was a little bit different, but largely the same as our past meetings. One of the big differences is that it's recorded. If you're interested in watching that conversation, you can. It's a little different than a typical work session, because while in every work session we are meeting with each other and with staff to discuss potential action that we'll take or legislation, we are mindful of the fact that folks may be watching at home, and we keep you up to speed and fill you in on things and try and provide some context. With the budget meetings, we've got a dozen hours of going through every department's budget, and the conversation is much more among us in the room, and so we may not be bringing people up to speed. And something to really keep in mind is we may talk about something we talked about last night will come up in another iteration a couple of times tomorrow, and then maybe on Monday night, and then by the time we vote on something on December 5th, we may have discussed how to pay for an item or how much to invest in an initiative at half a dozen different points. And so something we said last night, you may, if you watched it, you may think you know exactly how that's going to look in the budget, but it may change a bunch more times as we try and fit all the pieces of the puzzle together for the budget and get to the tax rate that we're looking to get to and cover all of the priorities that the board decides we want to have, so that on December 5th, when we vote on that budget, we can all feel that our priorities are being represented and that the budget is going to be able to fulfill them in a way that Debbie and staff is going to be able to implement. And I will say that one of the benefits to having it recorded is we can go back and look and make sure that we understood what somebody was saying, and people can be accountable for what was said. And I have to say, there was not a lot of grandstanding, and so I hope that that continues to be the case. Sometimes when we're on camera, we speak a little differently than when we're off camera. So I was pleased that everybody seemed to handle themselves in as effective a manner as possible to get through all that very important business. All right. Well, the budget is a roadmap of what we're going to do in the next year. And so, Debbie, I look forward to having you deconstruct it for us.
Thank you, Mayor Garrity. I do have a presentation so that the camera can catch the slides online. So if the three of you want to relocate. I think so, but let me just. You're just gonna have that with your mouse. Just push it down. Not push it, just pull. Oh, just pull. Oh, got it. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all so much for listening to this riveting presentation of what $36 million looks like. This is actually a copy of the budget book. It's quite thick. It has a lot of detail in it for anyone who's really interested, but I think it's best if we look at the global way that the village is intending to invest the money that all of you in our community invest here through your taxes and fees and things like that. I do want to say thank you to Tom Warren and Dale Vieira, who are our treasurers. They have just put hours and hours into this, as the mayor indicated earlier, and without their help, this would be very difficult to do. I do want to recognize our Mayor Garrity and Deputy Mayor John Codman, trustees Quantel Bazemore, trustee Rika Levin, and trustee Omar Herrera. This is such an important function of government to be able to look at a budget and fulfill their fiduciary duties. This is how we set the tone for the coming year. This is how we plan to invest our monies. And this budget really is what we call a living document, because it can change here and there, but only by the authority of this board and the mayor. So I want to thank them for what they've been able to give us through the years, and look forward to working with them on this next budget, because I think we have some really good things that we want to accomplish. I included the Village of Ossining organizational chart this year. We start with the citizens who elect the Board of Trustees and the mayor. The Board of Trustees hires a village manager. They appoint the fire chiefs and fire members. They appoint a corporation council, and they appoint the police chief, but they also are the police commissioners. So they oversee exactly what happens in the police department. You'll notice that at the very bottom of this screen, there are a couple things that are in red. One of the major initiatives we're doing this year is we are going to be launching a new program for parking, so that parking permits can be purchased online and it can be tracked online. And we will be moving that function solely to the police department. They are open 24/7. It just lends itself great to customer service. And with the online program that's available, it'll make it so much easier for everyone, and it will combine what's happening in many, many areas into one, so that it'll make a lot more sense for our public. Second is legislation that the Board of Trustees passed on property registration. So looking at new businesses and looking at vacant properties. And so this is going to actually require a dedicated effort. And so we've created not really a different department, But I think that we wanted to highlight the fact that this is something the board has put a lot of effort in and emphasis in, and we want to make sure that we are paying attention to these items. Yes, ma'am. If you have questions going along, I really don't mind the interruption. So, do you have a question on this? Mhm. Oh yeah. Yeah. It fell apart. Yeah.
Hate this even more. Okay. So, love the idea of the org chart, but since you're taking questions as we go along, so we have IMAs. So, some of these people also function on behalf of the town, yes?
They do.
So, I think in an org chart that goes to the public, um, I think we know what's what, but I think maybe like a little green, I mean, like if you're going to differentiate by color, something so that when the public looks at this, because I look at this and I think each of these is a department. I understand they're all different sizes. I think the public does too. Um, I don't know why the arrow is pointing to Board of Commissions. I think it's supposed to be an arrow that points both ways. I love the fact that you put the citizens on top. I think that's great. But I would appreciate on the IMA stuff that you do some lines in the middle of the boxes or something so that people understand that some of it is multi.
Sure. I can tell you that the reason for the boards and commission was that the board of trustees appoints the boards and commissions, and that's really the intent there. Yes, they do report back, so a double arrow would be a great idea for an addition. So thank you for that. On the next slide, just some of the really big projects that we have in store for 2019. In the Public Works Department, we are looking at beginning the construction of our water treatment facility. Many of you have heard about this project. It will begin construction sometime this spring, and we're very excited about it. If you've watched any of our last meetings, we have water tanks now that are going to require mixers to keep the water mixed in the tank so that when they're distributed to the homes, they're of better quality than what might have been if the water was sitting there. We're trying to move that water around. So that is another big project for us to install those mixers, and the engineering is being done on that, so we expect for the implementation to be in 19. We are still moving forward on the Operations Center upgrades. That is going to involve installing an elevator, some roofs, some miscellaneous upgrades to that building, but that too will be a very large project that we do in 2019. And the fourth one for Public Works is moving forward with 200 Main Street to remove the debris and the contaminants that are inside the building so that possibly that building can be repurposed. And we have applied for a grant to pay for about 65% of this project. We have not heard whether or not we've been awarded that grant, but we are very hopeful that will come through. In the planning department, one of the large things that we really have focused on is the land use master plan, zoning code updates, processes, how things are put through our system. So that is a very large initiative as well that will be done by our planning department. In the police department, we are also looking at parking meters, parking enforcement, and this goes along with being able to buy a permit online. But the parking meters that we have are starting to fall apart and we can no longer get parts for them. So we have been reaching out to various companies to see what kind of products are out there. We've met with the police department and their team to see what they think would be best. And when we think that we have some ideas, we'll be bringing that forth to the board for a discussion. And in the clerk's office, we are looking to implement new software that will handle our boards and committees, the agendas, the minutes, the recordings, and make it much more customer friendly as well as easier for us as an internal process to handle. But one of the companies that we found actually will take all of our videos and any of our documents and translate it into any language. And I thought that was something that I've heard this board many times talk about as far as being able to engage residents who may not speak English as their first language. Questions? All right, we'll move into general fund revenue summary. Obviously, the largest percentage of our revenue is through property taxes. That's 63%. You can see quite a few of smaller areas where we get money, not so much, but property taxes, non-property tax revenue, departmental income, and intergovernmental charges certainly lead how we get our money in here. So we've put together a pie chart so that it makes it a little bit easier to read. I really wish this would focus better. I know that the numbers are a little hard to read, but it really breaks down quite a bit of documents that are in here so that it's classified. When we look at our appropriations, then we look at police, public safety being 32% of the cost of government. We have interfund transfers. We have a small transfer that goes to Section 8. We do have debt service, employee benefits, home and community services, culture and recreation. Not much on economic development yet, but we're hopeful, and some transportation. So again, when you're reading this at home, you can look at what we've done in both in 16 and 17, actually, what our budget was in 18, and what we are proposing for 2019.
So is public safety, you said the police?
Police.
And employee benefits. So do the police employee benefits go in the public safety pie chart part or the employee benefits pie chart part?
So employee, what was the question?
So police also have
They also
employee
have
benefits.
employee benefits.
But
Employee
is-
benefits is for everybody.
So the police employee benefits, are they in that 31% or are they in that 30%?
The police employee benefits are in the 31%.
So basically, the police salary
This is police operations.
operations.
Right,
Gotcha.
right. Yes.
Is it just police or is it also fire?
And fire.
And the building?
Oh, building department?
Oh,
Mm.
Is building department included in that 32?
Yes, it is actually. It is. If we look at appropriation by type, you can see that personnel services is 45%. Our employee benefits is 30%. Contractual obligations are 16%. We spend about 1% on equipment and outlay, and 6% in debt service and a little bit of interfund transfer. So the majority of it is people. We are a people business, and without people, we can't provide public service. So that's why most of that is spent there. If we look at the number of personnel, total count in this budget is 192 and a half positions. That is up 6 positions from 186.5 positions. We are looking at one additional person in IT to be an IT technician that's on staff with us all the time and can help Craig. We're looking for, in the building department, we are looking for one additional code enforcement officer, one additional staff member, and a director. So the director last year was budgeted 50% in the building and 50% in the planning office. So we've eliminated the planning office one, and we want to hold one FTE in the building department. Essentially, that is to handle the additional work that's going to be required for the property registration and the vacant property project. We are also looking for, yesterday we met with Andy and Paul. We talked about water, and I made the statement to the board that there were no changes in payroll, no changes in personnel, but there's actually one additional in the water fund, and that is for a laboratory technician. There is the planning office goes from 2.5 to 3. So we are actually eliminating the half-time management position, which we're moving over to the building department, but we are adding a GIS technician. That's planning. No, I did. So we spent a lot of time on Paul's, but we didn't spend a whole lot of time on the water department. And it totally slipped my mind that we do have one additional person in the water department. That's for the laboratory tech.
So at some point, I'd like to see an arc. Sorry. Okay, so we had a whole meeting yesterday, but this personnel issue should have been presented. That's what the departments. So you're mentioning it now, but are we going to see an arc of all the personnel? This is an overview, but we're going to start
I just got
looking
these
at that.
numbers today, so I put it together so we could see how many positions we were adding in the budget.
All right, but at some point we're going to look at the overall and see what it looks like. Okay.
Absolutely. When we look at the water fund, the estimated revenues is estimated to increase by $10,182. When you look at where we spend the money, 28% of that is for the source of water, 12% is in purification, 13% is in transmission, 13% in debt service, and 34% in administration and other functions. The sewer fund, we do use some of the fund balance. You can see in 2018 we allocated $100,000 of fund balance. This year we are proposing to use fund balance of $115,000 to balance out estimated revenues. The way we spend the money is in the sanitary system itself, 22%. The sewage pumping function is 5%. Debt service is 20%. And administration and other functions is 52%. In our Section 8, we run a Section 8 housing for the U.S. Housing and Urban Development. The budget in estimated revenues is expected to increase by $20,702. Federal aid is 97% of our revenues. We have some miscellaneous revenues at about 0.5%. And then we do supplement from the general fund about 2.5%. In the expenditures, 89% is payment to landlords and 11% is administration. Yeah, it's been going down for a while for HUD.
Just across the board.
Across the board. So what we usually get an allocation that says how much we're going to be getting, and then we have to adjust to it. In our debt service review, revenues are expected to meet our expenditures. We are looking at $359,550 increase in the general fund contribution. We are looking at $86,396 decrease from the water fund, a $2,596 decrease from the sewer fund, and we are expecting to use $35,000 less of fund balance in the debt service. For the expenditures, the serial bonds and interest will increase by $216,519. Bond interest will go up $54,039, and interfund transfers will be reduced by $35,000. The general fund proposed budget, the total appropriations is expected to increase by $1,133,569. That is a 3.17% increase. The total to be raised by taxes is expected to increase $729,760, which is 3.31%. The change in assessed value, which is really important here in this discussion, the assessed value, the average in 2018 was $311,689. And this year, the assessed value average has gone up to $318,463. So the average value has gone up $6,774, which is about a 0.2% increase. The rate per thousand of assessed value last year, we levied a tax of $10.8492. This year, we're proposing $10.8714, which is about a 2 cent increase. So it's 2 cents. And then your average tax bill last year was $3,381.59. This year, your average would be $3,462.14, which means your taxes for the year would go up $80.56. It's important for me at this point to point out that your taxes, if we do nothing different in the government and we keep the rate exactly the same, will still increase by $73.49 simply because the assessed value has gone up. So the tax change is really $7.07. Yes, you will pay $80.56 more, but as a result of this tax levy, it's only $7.07. So your investment per day in 18 was $9.26, and in 19 would be $9.48, which is a 22-cent increase. Again, 20 cents is associated with the increase in assessed value and 2 cents associated with the levy.
Could you just, when we say the average tax bill, that's based on a property that is assessed at what amount? Is that a $350,000 house or?
No, the average assessed value last year, according to the tax rolls, was $311,000.
Oh, that's what I'm looking at. Okay, and so
Right,
now it's
and now it's
318. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
So where does your money go? For $9.48, $3.22 is used for police. That's 34%. $2.28 is associated to benefits, which is 24%. $1.42 is associated with public works, which is 15%. General operations takes $1.04, which is 11%. Parks and Rec is 85 cents, which is 9%. Fire is 38 cents, which is 4%. And planning and code enforcement is 28 cents, which is 3% per day. I want to thank you for your attention. That's the end of my presentation. This presentation will be posted to the Village of Ossining website. Comments on this presentation or on the budget can be submitted via email or through our website or in writing at the village offices. There are additional public meetings that the Board of Trustees will be holding with the different departments. They begin tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. and will last most likely till 5 p.m. And then again on Monday, November 19th, but we did change the time, I believe, to 5:30 to 7:30. So this is incorrect. But to look for a schedule of the departments that are going to be under review, you can go to our website and it'll tell you when different departments are up for discussion. Or you can contact me at the office, and there is my email or my direct line phone number. So thank you so much, and I'll answer any other questions the board should have.
Would it be helpful if we kept this open, or would you like it closed?
Yeah.
Well, I think actually we could comment, but really this is the public hearing, so there are a couple of members of the public hearing. If this was your introduction for the public hearing, so that you have more insight into what the budget is there anyone who would like to comment on the proposed 2019 budget? You don't have to. It's just I wanted you to have your opportunity. That's what we're here for. Officially, that's what we're here for. Is the public hearing.
Any way to ask a
Please.
question about clarification?
Please.
Sure.
I would just like to, Frank Sylvester, 5 Butler Place. I would just like to be educated. Just one question on the sewer fund.
Okay.
It seems like an awful lot of money for administration, over $1 million, when we have a county sewer system that we're paying big money for our sewage through our county tax, and then getting taxed again on water usage in the house for sewer tax. I was just wondering the large amount of money for administration. Thank you.
Good question. Do you want to join us? Because it's actually circled as one of my questions. I wasn't necessarily going to get into it today.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the Board of Trustees. We generally allocate in the salary schedule salaries for many employees, including the village board members, the administration, the finance department, legal staff, DPW, in terms of the administrative staff, and also several of the employees, their salaries are allocated between the general water and sewer funds, depending upon an estimate of the time spent on that function. So, even a portion of the trustee's salary is charged to sewer because you work on sewer issues. Finance department, because we do the water sewer billing and maintain the accounting records. DPW administrative staff, because they're processing the accounts payable bills. That includes the sewer fund. The legal staff could be handling claims involving sewer backups and such. So, it's just a little bit here and there, which seems to add up to $1 million.
So I can give a little more detail. I have here in the sanitary sewer system itself is $417,920. So we also have to take care of all of the lines. There are sewer pump stations, which we have to manage. That's another $103,000. There is some benefits associated with this, $157,000 for hospital insurance, but $382,000 is debt service. So there's quite a few bigger numbers. That number's here. Wait a minute, where am I? So we have debt service, right? And the 417 is the large. I mean, we do have employees that is their job, is to take care of that sewer system.
And just for clarification, this has been a practice.
Right.
For
Oh,
village,
yes.
village government for quite some time.
It has.
I'd also like to add that it's not just salaries. There's also contractual expenses. A portion of our liability insurance, even though we're pretty much self-insured, we do have insurance for above the large deductible that we have. So I just wanted to point out that it wasn't just salaries, that there are contractual expenses in here as well.
Right.
I think we have another member of the public.
Yes, Manuel Quesada. So I have several questions. I'm not sure if we don't even start. So I'm going to start at page 1, I guess, of your presentation, where you were talking about parking property registrations and the need of additional staff that's going to be taking care of some of these items in here, and how you were shifting some part-time to full-time.
Oh.
Page 1. So you kind of talked about the additional staff that you want to implement for the planning department, building department area. One thing that I'm not sure, and you didn't say, and I haven't seen that being part of the budget, but in the police department, you did put parking division. What does that mean for the police department? Are we going to be increasing an additional personnel for that person to take care of that? And if not, why not?
Right.
How does
So,
that balance? What is the difference between having a parking division and a property registration?
so the parking permits are either handled out of finance, the clerk's office, or the police department. Once we go online, they can all be handled out of the police department, and it won't require an additional person to do that. We already pay for parking attendants to do the parking enforcement, so we won't need additional people to do this. What the program will do is make it much more efficient for them because they'll be able to go on every day, see if there's a meter down, they know when to collect the money, and we will be implementing the new parking meters to be using plate readers so that it'll be much easier for the parking enforcement officers. We won't need additional
Which was
staff.
done already in 2018 budget.
Correct.
So again, I still, and I kind of gonna echo Trustee Levitt in regards to the personnel and had the bracket forms and what that means for structural and new departments itself. So I'm gonna jump into second page, which is the capital improvement stuff, public works. One that was a little dear for me about a year ago, which is the operations center. A couple months back, it was a presentation by the architects H2M where they came in, and I saw the presentation from that was done last night as well. So it was a little bit disappointing to see that nothing has happened within a year. So I look forward to see what the end results are going forward for 2019, which I think that's a project that has been on the books longer than I can remember, at least for 10 years or so. So that's something that I'm looking forward to see what happens into that. And the last one, I guess, is more like a general um, um, observation in my end. You have a lot of actual numbers from 2016, 17, but when we compare and when we're looking at numbers from 2018 budget and the 2019 budget proposed, we're looking at numbers of the 2018. We're now looking at numbers of the actual, correct? So some of the stuff, even like for the revenue part, we don't know exactly how much that is. We are looking at, again, because in the past, there's been occasions where, we estimating numbers for the budget, sure. So we don't really know exactly what those numbers are going to be until probably the first quarter of the following year. So when we comparing, we have to make sure, at least in my opinion, because we have done it in the past, we have a budget number from 2018, and then we have an actual number. So when you do a presentation like this, to me, I don't want to say it's misleading, but it's not the accurate information that we should be looking at. So again, that's just my observation, but it needs to be a clarification to the public because that's what you're doing here. You're doing a presentation to the public. So that to me is I think it's the basics of how transparent government should be.
Right. So that's a really good point.
Thank you.
This is a high level a high level view of exactly what's happening. For anyone who's looking for the 18 budget and the 18 actuals year to date, that's actually in the budget document that's posted online. But some of the data gets too cumbersome to review, and so we don't put everything on here because you can go to the actual document and read all of that information. The Operations Center, I do want to state that we had moved forward with that. When the cost estimates came in, it was significantly higher than I thought anyone would agree to. So we went back to the drawing board. So we are really excited about putting in the elevator and doing some of the changes, especially the roof. And we're moving forward on our solar contract, things like that. So it will happen in 2019, but for a much smaller cost. I just wasn't comfortable with the way the budget came in. So that's what's going on with that.
I just have one question regarding 200 Main Street. We've talked about this project early in the year, and I thought it was going to be a project to really like kind of fix the building, like to kind of bring it up to code.
Oh, no.
No, it's just going to be to remove contaminants and debris.
So This is a multi-phase project.
Okay.
First of all, there is contamination inside the building, and because it had been left unattended, the roof had leaked for a while. The first stage is to clean all of that out of there and to get rid of all of the infrastructure. So, for example, the plumbing and the electrical, and just rip everything out and clean it. Phase two would then be to come back in and restore the historic elements that we want to preserve, which is significant to the building. And then at the same time, either go out to bid to see if someone would then come in and utilize the building, or to decide whether you wanted to use it for yourself, or it's whatever the board wants to do with the building. But we first have to get it cleaned before we can do anything.
Gotcha.
Are we going around the table, or we're just
Yeah, I was just-
speaking up?
I mean,
Oh.
this is, you know, we're here, we're in a public meeting, we can discuss it. It's the public hearing and we don't have a lot of people who are gonna be asking questions, so we might as well take this moment to ask any questions if you have any.
So the 2019 initiatives, if I read this document as a, 50,000 feet in the air, I was sort of surprised that these are sort of what were chosen, not because you're not thinking of doing it. It's just that, the clerk's office piece doesn't seem to me as important as some of the other ones. It's not that it's not important. It just shows, the initiatives in the order of what you think are the big ones. I mean, to me, comprehensive plan requires some money, and to me, that is the biggest thing, I think. Wish we would have done it in 2018, but we didn't. To me, that's like one of the biggest pieces. I don't know if it's embedded in here somewhere. I don't know if we're going to discuss it. I don't know if it's that it doesn't cost so much to do it, so it doesn't make the list of the 2019, but it just feels like I would have liked that before parking meter upgrade.
So this is in no
Well-
particular order.
Okay,
It was, we already talked to Public Works,
right?
and quite frankly, we haven't had the rest of the discussions. And
Okay.
so I was like, oh, I wanted to put some additional things in there that were important. The land use master plan is the comprehensive plan. I just used a different term. And so I can correct that.
I
So
think
that
we
it's,
refer to it though. Do we refer to it this way, or do we refer to it in like public, because this is a public thing, so I'm just
At the term of art, the comprehensive plan.
okay.
yeah, it's,
So we're
it was
just
just,
gonna
it's,
call it
but
one
it's the
thing.
same thing. Yeah, it's
Okay, so that's
absolutely
this.
important. But I think you have Public Works working on certain things. You have the planning department working on something. You have the police department clerk. I mean, so everybody's kind of working on something, and that's was my intent to pull out something that was significant. Unfortunately, we haven't had our meetings with the other department heads. So this also can be updated for
Okay, so this is year to date, so to speak, and there'll be other
It's-
things that might jump on this page.
as the board
Do
directs.
this later.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Questions and comments for Manager McDonald?
Sure. I guess sort of one of the things that stands out for me is that when we look at the, you did sort of your how your investment dollars work. When we look at that page, or the $9.48 a day that your tax money goes towards, that 4% of it goes to the fire department. And I would just say that we are blessed to have a great volunteer fire department here in the village of Ossining. And I would also say that if we had to pay for those services, that number would be a great deal higher. And for those of you who have trouble wrapping your head around the cost of hiring drivers and doing other things, that this is a tremendous value and something that's very precious to the village. And I'm hoping that, we continue to support the great work of the Ossining Volunteer Fire Department, because to volunteer to run into a burning building is quite a thing. But I think we're blessed with that, and it's great the way it's been laid out. I like this investment scheme here. So, but I just wanted to point that out, that it costs even less than our Parks and Recreation. Otherwise, I'm just generally pleased with the overall presentation. I think, yeah, we don't have the actuals for the year. Yeah, maybe that would be a nice to have, but at a certain point you pack so much information in there, it's not really palatable. So,
Well, the year's not over.
right.
Right.
Well, exactly.
For one thing.
I mean, exactly. You know, I
Right.
mean, you've got trailing costs and stuff like that. So, but I think this is certainly a good start to the budget process.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I do want to mention that when we go line by line, when we look at this with the department heads, we really do focus on what have we spent over the last couple of years? What did we budgeted this year? And then we ask ourselves the question, are we on target for this year? Or should it be higher or should it be lower? So again, those documents are in this full budget, that number. And it is a very important part of the discussion that we have when we make a recommendation for what we want to put in the budget for you to consider.
Anyone else with questions and comments? Then the only thing that I'd like, as we're talking about the initiatives for 2019, we did a really thorough list of initiatives for 2018, and it was established at the end of 2017, and then we updated at the beginning of 2018. And you did a couple of quarterly, at least one, maybe two quarterly updates for us in writing, and we discussed it in a work session. But I think it's been a number of months, and this would be a really great time for us to look at what do we think were our 2018 initiatives? Where are we with them? And you lay things out in a nice spreadsheet sort of a way that would be really beneficial for us now, as we're looking for the 2019 initiative to see. We knew it was an ambitious list for 2018. I'd like to see how close we got and where we what's still at the top of our list of priorities. And so do you think that's something we can have during these budget discussions tomorrow, or together all day, and then Monday we have our last one? So maybe
Monday
that
I
would
can
be
have it to you because tomorrow's all day budget, and then I have to leave for Albany in the snowstorm.
So maybe you'll be doing it at home on
For the shared
Thursday
service.
night.
But I'd be happy to have it to you by Monday.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks. Be careful.
Thank you.
Okay. Good. That would be helpful. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. Any further questions or comments, or if not, then shall we make a motion to move into
Motion.
the work session? Motion to
So moved.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
All right. So, thank you, Debbie. Thank you to the public with your questions and comments, and happy to put this notebook away for a few hours and move on to our work session. We have.
Actually, Mayor, before we go into the work session.
Uh-oh.
No, we do have this agenda item with
Thanks.
regard to the MOU.
Oh, shoot. Do we have to go back into legislative session or just pretend that
No,
didn't
we didn't,
happen?
we closed the public hearing. We didn't close the legislative session.
Oh.
We closed
Oh, is that what we did? Okay, I don't think that's what I said, but good. Okay,
we'll deem it as you have closed the public
that's, we'll pretend that that's what we said, and we're all good with that. Okay. Motion to
All those
close the
in
public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
hearing. Thank you.
We are continuing the legislative session because we have a vote on, Now I'm forgetting.
That's right. This is a resolution to ratify the memorandum of agreement between the Village of Ossining and the Civil Service Employees Association, Local 100, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining ratifies the memorandum of agreement dated November 7, 2018 with the Civil Service Employees Association, Local 100, American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFL-CIO, Westchester County, Local 860, Village of Ossining, Unit 9613, which memorandum of agreement was ratified by the union on November 13, 2018, and be it further resolved that the provisions of the agreement between the Village of Ossining and the union set to expire on December 31, 2018, noted as the prior agreement, will remain in full force and effect until December 31, 2019, except that effective January 1, 2019, the wage rates in effect as of December 31, 2018, as set forth in Appendix C of the prior agreement, shall be increased by 2%. Do I have a motion?
Second. Comments from the board? I'll just say thank you to Debbie and to the leadership and members of the local CSEA to move forward with this sort of just holdover to keep things pretty much the same with more or less a cost of living increase so that we have some more time to do a more thorough patient negotiation for the new contract, keeping in mind a very likely and intended change with the health insurance, and there's all the questions that go along with that. So I'm pleased that we were able to all feel good about having another year to make this work for everyone. All right, all in
All those
favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Now, do we have a motion to adjourn the special session and move into work session?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Deja vu. Okay,
Now
So-
we're into work session.
Stuart, back to you.
Topic number one is regarding the Hidden Cove project. It's to discuss the special waterfront permit and the use of village property. And for that, we have Brad Schwartz from the firm of Zarin and Steinmetz, counsel to Plateau Associates. Brad?
Good evening, Stuart. Thank you for the introduction. Good evening, Mayor and members of the Board of Trustees. We were last before the board in July at a work session, July 25th of this year, where we reintroduced or introduced the special permit application before your board. We had presented a project update. You may remember we did a PowerPoint presentation updating your board as to the status of the project this summer. In the past few months, we've been continuing to process the application before the planning board, and we've reached a number of key milestones in the project. Most recently, the planning board issued a positive finding statement at its meeting in October. Made a number of findings the planning board did. In sum, the planning board found that all the potential environmental impacts of the project have either been avoided or minimized to the maximum extent practicable. That's the essence of a positive seeker finding statement. The finding statement also ends the seeker process, the environmental review process. So that means that other agencies with jurisdiction, just such as your board, is now in a position to issue their respective approvals. So we've been processing our variance application before the zoning board. In fact, we were there just last night on a public hearing. And so I'm here tonight at your work session to continue advancing the special permit application before your board. And the request tonight, respectfully, is that your board schedule the public hearing on the special permit for your next legislative meeting on December 5th. That would be the next step in advancing the special permit before your board. The planning board did authorize the issuance of a positive referral letter to the Board of Trustees, and you should be having that, my understanding is, any day now, together with a copy of the final finding statement. So you'll be getting that positive referral letter. And again, our request this evening respectfully is to schedule the public hearing for December 5th.
Stuart?
Mayor, I actually, when the board goes back into special session after the work session, I do have a resolution to call for the public hearing with regard to the special permit. Our zoning code does require that a public hearing be held for the issuance of the special waterfront permit in accord with the zoning code. That is a permit which can only be issued by the Board of Trustees upon a, and as Mr. Schwartz pointed out, the application has been made to the Board of Trustees. It was referred to the Planning Board by this board. The Planning Board will be issuing a recommendation that the special waterfront permit be granted. I'm just waiting for that letter to be signed off by Chairman Clark. He has already approved the letter. And so we're now at the phase to bring it back to this board, and that would require the holding of a public hearing with the proposal to hold that public hearing on the 5th of December.
Has anybody on the board had a chance to watch the planning board meetings that are going to that are resulting in the letter that we're expecting, the recommendation? I have not either. So the planning board, we made a referral to them, and I know there were a number of questions about the project in general. And as I recall, the special waterfront permit that we're being asked for has little to do with most of the project. What it is it's a question of access, and will we cut a sliver out of?
Well, that's actually separate.
Okay, then tell me what are we potentially, what are we holding the public hearing on?
Special, well, that's specifically for a special waterfront permit, which really deals with issues of density. And with regard to projects that are in the PWA zone, which is where this is, in order to get certain density calculations, they're required to get a special waterfront permit, and that is issued by this board. The issue about the additional property, the approximately, I think 868 square feet, if I remember correctly, is a separate issue. It's not part of the waterfront permit. The waterfront permit is simply a process that's required under our code for properties that are within the PWA zone, and it is something that is it's something the planning board cannot grant. They can only give you the recommendation that they think it should be granted. And we did refer it to them as was required. They did consider it at, I believe it was their last meeting when they also discussed the finding statement. And there was a referral letter that was drafted by special counsel. That letter is now being put onto letterhead for the planning board so it can then be sent to you folks, effectively indicating that they think the special permit should be granted. But I don't want to mix the two together. The
Thank you.
issue of the property is separate from the permit itself.
And that's not up for discussion right now.
Right now,
Bit of land.
it's just a waterfront permit issue. that we're
Now,
having.
what is the variance that's been applied for with the ZBA?
There were 3 different variances applied for. There is a variance, one with regard to the width of the building. The building is, I believe, Brad, 5 feet wider than it is supposed, than is permitted under the code. So there's a variance required for that. There's a second variance with regard to the water course. There is a water course that currently goes through the property. The proposal is to move that water course to the north. There is supposed to be a 25-foot buffer between the property and the water course. At some points, the water course will be only 3 feet.
It's a water course. It's like a stream.
Stream that goes down from the, in essence, from the plateau and actually empties into the Hudson.
So we're redirecting the way that the water currently just naturally finds its path. We're directing it.
Yeah, the water where
Not
it
we,
is
the
now.
developer is proposing to do
Right.
that.
Where the water is now located, at one time was used by the pill factory building to actually run some of their equipment. It was hydroelectric in essence. They were using it.
It's like
at
a
that
lot of
time.
water.
What?
It sounds like quite a bit of water.
There's an active stream at that location. So they are also going through the Army Corps of Engineers because that involves permits that have to be obtained through them. But from purposes of the zoning board, our code has a certain buffer that is required. They are going to be within that buffer, so they need a variance for that. The third variance they're requesting is with regard to the requirement both under the village code and the state law that property front on a public road where their property fronts onto is not a public road. It is, if you're all familiar with that portion, it's at the end of what we call the North Water Street extension. And the village actually has approximately the first 320 feet of North Water Street, about to where the pump station is. Beyond that are various easements and other agreements among the other property owners. So in order to construct the building at that location, they would need a variance because, again, they don't front on a public road. So those are the 3 variances that are being sought from the zoning board. There was a public hearing before the zoning board last night. It remains open and will be continued at the next zoning board hearing, which I think is December the 11th.
How many private property owners are there from where our property ends to where the Plateau Associates
Never
property
mind, I think
ends?
it's at least 2.
Two others.
I think it's 2.
Okay. And then they're comfortable with, they've provided whatever easements or access is required?
One of the things that will be an element of site plan, a condition of the site plan, is that we be provided with all documents reflecting that they basically have the ability to go there. This has been a lengthy subject of discussion with the developer as to the ability to essentially traverse beyond the village's property line. And we have been advised by the applicant and applicant's counsel that they have had discussions with the 2 property owners that lead up to where Plateau is located, but it will be something that the planning board will certainly want as a condition to know that they have the ability to get from point A to point B. So that's something that will be required from those different property owners as we proceed.
As a quick status update on that, if I may, we have an agreement, a signed easement agreement with the Castle Realty owners, and we're in the process of finalizing the agreement with Conga, formerly Santucci. But as Mr. Kahan indicated, requirements to present those easements would be a condition of the planning board site plan approval.
Further questions?
I don't have any questions. I just am uncomfortable being told that letters are on their way, they'll get here, and we should meet on December 5th. I would prefer to actually get letters in my hand and read them and look at all this stuff before I say, yeah, let's move this on to
The
December
board,
5th.
well, what I would ask is, and I appreciate that, the letters are with the chair of the planning board.
Okay.
The board, it can be called for the 5th. If the board is not prepared to proceed on the 5th, then the public hearing does not have to proceed on the 5th. because I think the resolution says, or, whatever date as the board deems appropriate for that. But my understanding from my discussions with special counsel is that, the letters should be to this board well in advance of the 5th. But again, if there's any reason for a delay, that can be delayed.
Well, I mean, the thing about a public hearing is as long as we in the public have had an opportunity to review any material of consideration, if we've had a couple of weeks, because there's a 10-day minimum or whatever it is, 14-day minimum
Right.
for the public hearing, and this is actually longer than that because we don't have a meeting next week, so we can't call for it next week. But theoretically, the paperwork could be available and online for anyone to look at and email
will-
to us in enough time.
And I'll make sure, for example, that the application that was made to this board for the permit is all online, so anyone who wants to see it can obviously see it. When the referral letter comes in, that will also be circulated so that can be made available. We also wanted to move it just a little faster because of the way with the Thanksgiving holiday, publication in the paper gets delayed. So we wanted to move quicker so that we make it within the publication period to get it into the newspaper on time.
Gary's not publishing next week. Interesting. Yes.
I guess my question is are we subject to any timeline restrictions with this process? In other words, are we free to? I mean, should we? I mean, I personally want to see the letters first before I would decide to have a public hearing. But are there any?
Trustee Feldman, I can let you know that the way the code is written, you have 62 days after you get back, basically, the recommendation from the planning board. So you have
there's plenty of time
So
then.
you have not gotten the planning board's letter yet. So
Right.
they have 62 days to let you know, and you have 62 days after
But
that.
we have
By the
until
way-
we have to the middle of we wait till January to
So that's
ask
where
for the
you're
public
fine.
hearing. Okay, I just wanted to understand that. I know there's timelines that are related to these things.
That's where you are.
So so that would be my thought is that I may not be here to make the final decision, but if I'm going to be voting on conducting a public hearing, I want to know what I'm doing here. So that would be my ask is that we wait for the letters to come to us and we have a chance to look
Yeah.
at it.
And I'll follow up with the planning board chair to just see where things are.
So I think respectfully, if I understood, I would ask the public hearing, I would ask to be scheduled for the 5th. The letter should be coming literally any day now. They were authorized back in September. It's been my understanding that it's literally been on the chairman of the planning board's for a little while now. So
But he gets 62 days, right? Did you say they get 62
yeah, the
days?
planning board
and
doesn't get
So
60.
you get 62, and then you have.
Then we do.
Yeah,
Okay.
you're not,
So everybody's within
you're not
the
under that.
parameters.
In other words, you don't have to act that night.
Mr. Zarin, is there aside?
Mr. Schwartz.
I'm sorry, Mr. Schwartz. Is there a timeline that we don't know about that is other than you just like things to move forward faster? But is there a date that that you're coming up against that hasn't been expressed tonight?
Look, our client is hoping to start construction in the spring, and we've done everything asked of us the last 5-6 months in terms of advancing the process before the planning board. We achieved the secret findings issued by the planning board, and so now we're at the point of advancing the process before all the other agencies to keep the project moving forward. So we were at the zoning board last night, and the next step before your board will be scheduling the public hearing. And if I, Stuart, Mr. Khan, on the referral process, the planning board makes a referral, then the board of trustees has time on which to vote. But the planning board's referral can be made at any time. And my understanding that that's going to be happening any day now.
Well, that's correct. I think the question more was, do they have the ability to consider and carefully consider the application? And they certainly do have that. I also want, just so the board understands where things are in terms of all different land use boards. It is correct that the finding statement has been approved by the planning board. The public hearing as relates to the site plan remains open. It has not been closed yet. The next planning board meeting is the last, I think the 27th of this month. So that is still open there. And as I said, obviously the zoning board of appeals is still considering the variances. They had the public hearing last night. So that is the process that is continuing as well. So there are matters before, all the land use boards. What Mr. Schwartz, one of the points I think he was trying to make is that with the finding statement being approved, effectively ending the secret process that then allows the other boards to take their actions. So that's why it's going in that particular direction. But site plan review continues open. It is still an open public hearing with regard to that, and that will be a decision to be made by the planning board in November as to whether they wish at that point to close site plan, because which itself starts its own clock, another 62-day clock, but we're not at that point yet.
John, do you remember because this is an unusual zone, and each zone has their own regulations. So the PWA zone coming to us for a special permit. Have we had this scenario before that I'm forgetting, where we've had to?
Hudson Step.
Hudson Step project.
Hudson Step. You granted the permit, and you granted a couple of extensions to that permit to them.
And the timing, if I may, worked very similar, where the planning board issued a finding statement and your public hearing was held a week or two after you received the finding statement from the planning board, and then your approval happened like a week or so after that. So the special permit process by your board, by the Board of Trustees, did move fairly quickly following your receipt of the planning board's secret findings.
Yeah, I'm actually not uncomfortable with scheduling the public hearing, because the public hearing, we can leave open the public hearing indefinitely. So if we are not satisfied that we have enough information, we can either not hold the public hearing. If people show up and they want to be heard, we can listen to them, and then we can keep it open till the 19th and then until January if we want to. Or I assume, right?
I don't share that opinion. I think there's more work that has to be done. I mean, I want to see the planning board document. I'd like to see the zoning board move their process a little bit farther along. If for some reason you can't get any of the zoning variances, the public hearing is moot. If you can't clear things there, then I can't see calling a public hearing for something where we've got incomplete information, and that's pretty much my opinion of it.
Respectfully, Trustee Common, you have all the information, right? We submitted an application of full
You'll have
application.
to excuse me, but I don't agree with your opinion on this. Okay, and my opinion is that we wait. I mean, you've indicated that you're ready to go. That's great. If another few weeks to be sure that we want to call this public hearing is I think the proper thing to do. And I certainly appreciate your advocacy for your client, but we're here to represent the public. And I would certainly say that the circumstances of this property has not been uncontroversial. So I would like to deliberate, which is what we do. So I would thank you for your advocacy and your time.
If I may, in that respect, the sooner the board opens a public hearing and you begin receiving public comment.
Mr. Schwartz, we get it. We get your position on this, but I think Trustee Herrera, you had a comment on this.
Yeah, so I'm actually happy that we got some historical guidance as to how the board in the past has operated.
No, he's on. Oh, he's
on.
try. Maybe this is loose again. Right.
Okay. The historical guidance as to past practice is important, because people do look at how we operate when it comes to each applicant. I do know how the process works, so I kind of agree with Mayor Garrity that even if after we read the letter tomorrow, next week, we could decide to not even have it, right? So it seems like the process has been going. You read what the planning board chair said. And
I was at the meeting. Yeah.
And so I do take that as actual information, right? So as far as just scheduling it, I'm okay with that.
And I invite anyone, because they are all are now on YouTube. So if anyone wants to watch any of those meetings,
Thanksgiving Day fun for me. Thanks.
okay.
There's been a couple of different opinions expressed on the wisdom of moving forward with the public hearing, but I think there's one trustee we've not yet heard from. Trustee Bazemore, would you like to weigh in?
Actually, I could actually be split on this. Yes.
Oh, the power of being tipping vote.
No, I could actually be split on this, because as much as I understand the need to call for a public hearing and knowing that we can leave it open, at the same time, you raised a great point about I haven't actually watched the planning board meetings or received the letters. So I can definitely understand the need to really delve into information before calling a public hearing. I don't, whichever way the board decides to go.
You decide, Trustee Dinsmore. So here's the thing. The thing about the public hearing is it's not a time that we make a decision. It's just a time when we listen to the public. So the public has the opportunity to be heard. So it's important that the public has all the information to be able to consider so that they can comment on it. It's unusual for us to take any action the night of a public hearing.
Well, that being said, I mean, just given the timing, right? It's Thanksgiving is next week, right? And the holidays. I mean, if this is about the public, I think we want to give the public a little more time.
If I could briefly just address that point, Trustee, the public has been digesting this information since May, when the first seeker public hearing was held, and then in June when the first site plan public hearing was held. And there have been public hearings literally every month since May. There were joint hearings on seeker and site plan. It's all the same information.
How many people come?
I was going to say respectfully, yes, there has been a public process that I do understand. But the minute that people actually watch these meetings, then things become public. So I understand that there's a public process, but the minute that we say public hearing, whatever this project is and special use permit, it's actually another spin in the community. So yes, you are correct that there's been a public process, but if it's about the public, knowing that another potential building can be coming in the community, one could make an argument. I would actually make that argument that maybe not December 5th, maybe December 12th, or the
Well,
following.
it's
day.
just, we have two more this year, December 5th and December 19th.
That's it.
And then we move into January, which is fine. It doesn't matter that if we had the public hearing and held it open to a new year with a slightly different board, with a new board, does that matter? The public hearing can continue, right? We don't know.
No, it would be fine. You
Okay.
don't-
So the only if we don't call for it tonight, which we obviously don't have to, and I'm hearing that maybe we're not going to, then what that means is we'll probably get the letter, and if what Mr. Khan has indicated to us, we'll probably then call for it on the 5th to take place on the 19th, and then people can come to the public hearing on the 19th. If we call for it now, then people can come on the 5th, and we can hold it over to the 19th, and then they can come on the 19th. I mean, I don't feel that strongly about it. I just philosophically, if there is a way where we can keep the process moving forward and get people to weigh in, and the only reason that we wouldn't be at this point is because we haven't seen the letter. I'm generally of a mind that if there's an opportunity to invite the public to speak on it, then there's no reason for us to get in the way of that. And that's by saying we're going to hold off 2 more weeks. Okay.
If the public comes on December 5th and they need more time, and there's a
Okay,
difference.
really?
Sorry.
We really know where you stand on this.
So, I mean, I'm staying with my position. I don't like this. There's a process in place. I believe that all public meetings should be agreed to when the board sees what they need to see. The reason there are these processes in place is that you should call for public hearings when you gather the information that you need to gather. So I appreciate that you've seen it, and I went to a couple of meetings where you guys were there, but we look at a lot of things all day long, and John's right, get the stuff to us, let us focus on it, and you could argue, well, it doesn't really make a difference for another couple of weeks before we call a public hearing. The same way you can argue it either way. I just think there's reason for processes, and for me, I'd like to see the stuff instead of just being told it's on its way. And I don't hear that the planning or zoning or anybody else did anything they weren't supposed to. So, and I actually sat for 3 hours in a meeting that included this, and I still would rather have everything lined up. So, because I think that's why we should do when we call for public hearings. So I'm in agreement with John. So it's back to
December 19th.
Unless somebody
Trustee
changed
Bazemore.
their mind.
I'm
The-
sorry,
There's 5 people.
I respectfully, I need to interject. Just again, the secret finding statement exists. It can all be reviewed, and there's a referral letter from the planning board. It's a 1-page referral letter recommending positive to issue the special permit, and it's a referral. You're not about to receive a lengthy document that's going to
Mr.
take so much
Schwartz,
time
listen,
to digest.
we're going to issue a special permit, and that's going to be a vote by this body. Okay? So thank you for your input. But this board's going to take its time, and the majority of the board is going to make the decision on how we're going to proceed. We're all going to fit within the timelines that are necessary. So I just ask you to stand down. Okay?
December 19th.
It's up
Would
to, I
that-
mean, I think,
No, I think
unless
we
somebody
can,
here
we can
changes
call
their
for the
mind.
public hearing on the 5th.
Okay.
That's what I would,
We can-
once we've all seen the information, we've seen the progress of the other things, that's would be my.
Okay.
When we come back on the 28th, if there's anything that has been received by then, we could actually talk about it then. But it wouldn't be too late for us to call for it to happen on the 5th. We could call for it to happen on the 19th. At this point, if we're not going to vote to call for a public hearing, it will not be happening on December 5th, correct?
Yes, that would be correct.
Because he has to get in.
Remind me, the 28th is going to be what? Is that?
Yeah,
a-
what
It's
is
work
that?
session here. It's
Session
our
here.
last work session of November.
Yeah, is that right? 28th?
So just to recap.
For a
Oh,
public.
okay.
My last annou-
November? No, 2 weeks from today, we will be here. If we
14
have,
more
we
days.
can talk about this all again, the 5 of us, next in 2 weeks, if there's anything more to talk about. But the soonest that we would have a public hearing at this point, so if we're not going to call it now, is December 19th. Okay, which is fine. Nope,
one more,
think
one
you
more, then
have
I'll
been
stop.
heard.
No downside in noticing it. Get this letter tomorrow. You could always adjourn it and cancel that public hearing on the 5th. There's no downside in noticing a public
Yeah,
hearing.
but we
Mr.
have to
Schwartz.
notice it, and we have to we're going to spend money to do this. Okay, I mean,
We
I
voted. Did you
understand your
vote?
advocacy, but
It's
you're just
still on the table for the board to decide after they review documents to keep it on the
yeah.
table.
It's like
No,
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 that's
No,
we-
no.
time will run out.
Because if
Because
wait
we
till-
have to give it 2 weeks notice, and we have no,
Let's do it. Is it 2 weeks?
the 19th is this,
19th of November.
I got to get into the paper.
yes.
I'm gonna pause my
I'm saying
public
we can chat about it again in 2 weeks, but it's the soonest it will be on for a public hearing will be the 19th of December, and we can.
So we'll hold the resolution for tonight. We won't do anything tonight. I understand. Got it.
just for clarification for the 28th, prior to applications that we granted approvals for, we got the letters on time from the planning board from.
I would need to go back and check just to make sure
Just for
because
consistency purposes.
I will check because it
Yeah,
preceded
yeah,
my time, so I have to make sure that that was the case. I'll be happy to look.
That's all. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I mean the thing about consistency is it's not the same 5 members of the board. It's not the same project. So every time something comes before us, we have to make the best decision with the information we have at the time.
Agreed.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. All right. Mr. Kahan.
Thank you. Okay, our next topic in work session is proposed local law 11 of 2018, which I did forward to all you folks yesterday. I do have additional copies here, and this relates to the proposal is to add an Article 6 to our Chapter 241 taxation, which would be tax abatement for rent-controlled and rent-regulated property occupied by certain senior citizens or persons with disabilities. As I indicated in my covering note to you folks yesterday, the proposed local law is modeled on the ordinance that is in effect now in Croton. The main issue for this board, if it wishes to adopt, and we'll use the abbreviations SCRI for senior citizen or DRI for disabled, is really what the income level would be, the maximum income level. It is currently $50,000 pursuant to New York Real Property Tax Law 467B. That $50,000 level will remain on the books until June of 2020, at which time it goes back to $29,000. There are, however, about 5 bills currently pending in Albany to change that when it sunsets out. One would raise the 50,000 up to 70,000. One would link the increase to the consumer price index and allow the commissioner of Homes and Community Renewal to each year basically raise it to that percentage. So that's something that's pending. Another amendment, another revision that is pending in Albany now is, in addition to having basically a discount or an exemption for senior citizens and disabled persons, but also have one where the family is spending more than 1/2 of its disposable income on rent. So currently it's 1/3, which is what is provided for in Scree and Dree, but there are two bills, one in the Assembly and one in the Senate, to basically put on a third section to that, which would be folks who are spending more than one half of their income. All of those are, you know, debatable. They have not gone into law. Right now, it's $50,000, but this board can decide they can do a lower number if they wanted to. In fact, if you look at the different ordinances throughout Westchester County, they range from $50,000 on the high to as low as $14,000, $15,000, which I think is what you see in Pleasantville. So that's combined within that particular, you know, dwelling unit or within that particular household. So it's not just the person over 62, but it would be everyone, and they combine everybody, because when the application is filled out, everyone has to put down their income, and those determinations as to you know, whether or not you're subject to the exemption are made by DHCR through the rent office, which is actually right here in White Plains. What that means in terms of taxes is that for the amount that the individual is exempted from rent, that equates to a tax abatement for what you want for that property owner. So for each unit that applies, they would get a comparable reduction under the state law. You must apply for this every 2 years, and it requires basically 2-year leases to do that. If you have applied for it, I think 5 times, you can then start doing a short form, so you don't have to keep going through it. The proposed local law essentially adopts 467B of the real property tax law, but has, there are just a few things we changed. One was with regard to when the application has to be filed, because we work on a January to December fiscal year. I had a discussion with Tom Warren and with Debbie, and we, I think, agreed on October 1st would be the date that the applications could be in to HCR, so that would give enough time to do it and then get it for the following tax year. And the way it works is the individual files the application. It's determined by HCR, and then the individual gets an exemption certificate. A copy of that exemption certificate goes to the owner, and a second copy goes to the treasurer of the village or municipality where that is done, so that they can basically make the notation on the particular tax records, so that can be done there. The proposed local law here covers both senior citizens and persons with disabilities. There are some municipalities in Westchester that only have it for senior citizens and not for persons with disabilities. We do have in our tax code already a provision dealing with persons with disabilities who get property tax exemption if they are owners of such, but this obviously does not apply to them. This also would allow, if a person who is, let's say, disabled or 62 or over and moves to another rent-regulated building, they could then simply file a transfer application. If the person, in fact, rents 2 contiguous units, they can basically get the benefit for both units. That's also provided under state law. There are people who have that. So if those of you have 2 dwelling units, you can actually.
But you're a senior citizen or you're disabled, and your income is below $50,000.
You still have to be below 50. You still have to be.
But
below
you're
50.
paying rent on 2 neighboring apartments. Okay, well, that's probably not a provision we need to think too much about, unless there's some scenario that I'm.
I don't even think such scenario would. Yeah,
Who can afford to do that?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it could be there,
just
but I just
it's in there.
That's a New York City.
Yeah.
That's all.
Remember, this ordinance does apply. It does have subsections dealing with, you know, cities over 1 million. There is only one city over 1 million that covers that, but it does have a provision for a second dwelling unit that is in here.
So I just have one question with
Sure.
respect to income. When they're figuring out income, are they talking about taxable income, or is it like I get 24,000?
Right here. There's like a.
Yeah, and well, if you look, Trustee Bazemore, at the application for the rent, what their income for their calculation, they're looking, for example, Social Security income, SSI or SSDI, pensions, wages, interest and dividends, public assistance. Deductions would be federal taxes, Social Security taxes, and things like that. So basically, anything that would be considered your income would be calculated to get you to that, if the board chooses $50,000 or whatever that maximum number would be. In view of the fact that the $50,000 number is currently scheduled to sunset in 2020, Croton has a provision which I have put into this proposed local law, which is that should the state numbers change, the village numbers will essentially follow the state numbers, so that it would not require coming back before this board each time there is a change. But that again is, that's subject to discussion here. But the main issue is basically the level that you want to set it at. Do you want to keep it at the 50,000, which the state changed in 2014, or as I said, you can go to a lower number if you want to. You can't exceed the state's maximum. But you can have a number below that.
I just wanted to add that the eligibility that was stated by Chuck Lefnick previously during the community center, and also program in general, is that Austin would have a eligibility rate.
He's still not able to hear you. I don't know what's going on.
But am I good now? Okay, so I was saying that the eligibility as per DHCR would be that Austin, as many Westchester communities kind of fall into this, is that it's usually, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding, 2% or less of people that didn't qualify for the program. So it's a very, 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 very small amount of people that will crucially need the program.
Why does Sophie? I heard him say that. Why is that?
When I spoke with him, he said that was just the trend.
Well,
that
so
they see.
so he's talking about averages. He's not actually. We have a huge number of buildings involved, and this is one of the more affordable environments in Westchester County. I'm expecting that there will be actually a larger number. Does he actually know the number? I mean, does anybody know the number of seniors or disabled people in these particular buildings?
No, we don't, because we don't have that kind of count. So
Nobody does, though. I mean, we don't track that. Excuse me? No, I don't think the census does, actually.
So old anyway, census is dated.
Right. So nobody actually knows the number that's involved in this, except what the averages have been elsewhere.
Well, he also indicated that in New York City they have much higher rates because they very actively educate the public.
So what's the average in New York City, though?
I think he said around 10%.
I recall him saying 10% in New York City and
high.
less than 2% in Westchester, where it's, and also in Westchester, any community that sets the threshold at 14,000, why do they even have this program? That's ridiculous. One of the questions I have is, so I wasn't aware that there was this additional proposed legislation. I don't know how viable it is. You said there's 3 different potential laws. One would raise the state max to 72,000, I think you said.
One was to 70.
Okay, to 70,000. One was to connect it to the consumer price index so that they wouldn't have to keep raising and lowering it. It would just move along with. I don't know if they'd stay at 50 and then have it increase with the CPI.
That's the proposal that I saw, is that the 50 would stay, but then with the CPI increase, the commissioner could simply then issue it.
Well, yeah, then that's how it should be
administrative
done.
order raising it.
That's good governance. That actually makes sense. Or then you have a ratio of if they are spending more than half of their income on the rent,
Right.
then that's the qualification. I don't know how likely any of these these proposals are to pass. If they don't pass, then my concern is that somebody in Ossining goes, and this is a bit of a process, and you're talking about senior citizens or people who are disabled going through a bit of a process to get approved by October, or to get through their application process by October of 2019. And come January 1st, 2020, anybody who
June of 2020.
okay, so they'll have less than 1 year of benefit if they're making higher than 29,000 but lower than 50,000. And I guess that's the best we can do if we want to have it open to as many people as possible, and then just educate people as they're doing the application process that they may actually not be eligible within the first year that they thought they were eligible.
Well, I think you're going to see, because as we've discussed when we were talking about ETPA, currently the ETPA sunset is June of 2019. But every 5 years that has been amended and it's been revised. With regard to the income levels, the initial income level I think was $4,000 way back when, and every couple of years the legislature has increased it. As I said, it's interesting that in 2014 when they increased it to 50, that was also when they passed the sunset provision to have it go back to 29. And that's why you now see both Senate and Assembly bills to deal with that. And some of those were as recent as, May of 2018. So, what's going to happen, I do not know when the legislature comes back in January. But you're right. Right now, if nothing happens, it would go back to $29,000 as of June of 2020.
So then most of the people who would probably be applying, they might make $30,000, $40,000, or $45,000.
They would earn too
For
much.
disabled, you know.
If they would qualify at the 50, but they may not qualify at the 29. But the best we can do is just to set it at whatever the state max is, and then if they are not eligible, then they're no longer eligible. But we'll just have to
Right, because
provide the best information possible at the time that they're applying.
Right, because they have to apply every 2 years. What I don't know is, since it's 2 years, and if they apply now, would they get, they may get the benefit for 2 years, but then they have to reapply. And if it's then down to 29 and their income is,
And I say we, but it's actually not us. It's DHCR that would be doing this whole process.
they handle all of that. In fact, one of the proposals that's before one of the amendments that's there is more to assist people with completing the applications, to essentially make it that you use the 6 most common languages in your particular village and translate the forms into that, because currently the forms are not translated. The state doesn't do that. So, you just get them and you have to fill it out. And part of it is making sure people, because it's up to the applicant to file these forms. This is not something that the owner has any responsibility to do. It's certainly, nor the municipality. So the applicant has to be able to get this form filed and get it into the office in White Plains, which is where it goes.
So the tax issue on this in the building, I know that we do this for property owners. So the tax issue looks like, I don't know, 3% of your building, however, units you have falls in, qualify. Run me through what you think the tax is. It sounds like the owners of the building would get less income after year 2, it sounds like.
Well, the tax, what the owner gets is simply this. Under SCREE, the owner of a rent-controlled or rent-stabilized apartment who is barred from collecting the rent increases as a result of an application will receive a real property tax abatement in an amount equal to the rent increase exemption granted to the tenant.
So if they were supposed to get a 2% increase,
whatever that dollar figure is.
They won't get the 2% increase, but they will get a tax abatement for that 2%.
Correct.
Okay.
That's what the landlord, would then get, as there. That's correct. That's exactly what it is. And if the abatement is given to the tenant, basically they're exempt from all increases. The only exception to that relates to security deposits. If the security deposit increases, they have to pay that. But major capital improvements, rent increases, things like that, they are not. They would be fully exempt from that.
And did somebody speak to Fernando and the tax and find out what this does after year 1 to tax revenues? I understand that theoretically it's a neutral game, right? But I'm not sure how that works actually when we look at taxes.
So I just wanted to remind the board that there was a public hearing, I think a month ago, or in September, where the Westchester Rental Guidelines Board was going to figure out what the rate for Austin is going to be.
Mhm.
I think
They voted last night.
And so I don't know who has the numbers right now, but there should be something coming out very soon. So with respect to the first year or the second year, I don't know. Once that vote,
That's a good point. No,
Yeah.
they voted.
Yeah.
There's a 0% tax rate
Okay.
increase in Austin for the first year.
so the first year
So
there would be.
So there will be
I'm sorry, rent increase.
Yeah.
Rent increase. Right.
so the income stay. Go ahead.
Please.
So they voted on a 0% increase for 1-year leases, a 1% increase for 2-year leases where heat or hot water is included, and a 0.8% increase for leases where the tenant pays their own utilities. So, you know,
What did they vote for everybody else?
2 and 3. I think 2% for 1 year and 3% for 2 year.
So,
0 increase for 1 year, 1% increase for 2-year leases with heat and hot water, and a 0.8 increase with leases where the tenant pays their own utilities.
so thank you for reading that, because if somebody is applying for Scree or Dree, it would be tied to a 2-year lease, correct? Does it have to be tied to a 2-year lease? Okay, so then there would be a 1%. I'm just trying to understand what this looks like. So there would be a 1%
Requires a
increase in there.
2-year written
So
lease.
let's say they have, $1,000 as their rent, and then they sign a 2-year lease and they apply for Scree. Then there's a 1% increase in the rent each month for that person's rent. Now, if they have qualified for Scree, let's say, then does that mean that their rent will not increase for the 2 years, and that dollar amount will be deducted from the property owner's tax bill for each year that tenant lives in that building and is because they're participating in that? Okay. Now, one thing that's important to keep in mind when we talk about the assessed value is it's not that the tax bill. We anticipate that some property owners are going to say they're going to come and aggrieve their taxes because their profitability is going to be capped. So they're going to say that they can't. When they talk about their rent rolls are capped, Scree and Dree is tied to the person who's been provided that exemption. So they may live in a building, 263 Elm Street in January, and in June they take with them their exemption if they move to 65
Another ETPA.
another
building, correct.
ETPA building. So the value of the rent rolls for that building haven't changed. It's just how the landlord gets the money, either from a rent payment or from a deduction in their taxes. It's apples to
In fact,
apples.
if the tenant leaves that building, the landlord must pay back to the village essentially the pro rata, in terms of the taxes, the abatement that he was otherwise getting. Because in other words, he may not be getting the abatement anymore. If someone moves in there and is above 50,000, if he's already been getting an abatement for the year, he's got it. There's a pro rata payback.
How often do they pay their taxes? The same way that we do, twice a year. They pay in advance.
No, I can read you what the language is, but there's a provision in the.
I'm just wondering if they're getting that only makes sense if they're getting the rebate in advance of getting the rent.
But otherwise, there's nothing to prorate.
But there's a provision in there as to what happens if they pay it. I just have to find the language for you.
Basically, what you're saying is that if they get the benefit and the tenant leaves, then they would have to.
Here we go. Upon the vacancy of the dwelling unit for which a tax abatement certificate has been issued, the owner thereof shall remit a pro rata portion of the tax abatement to the collecting officer of the village, and any amount due by reason of such vacancy shall be a lien upon the property on and after the date of the vacancy. So if he's got the benefit, in other words, he's got to remit money back, basically. Again, this is directly
Is
out
that
of the
how it
state
works? We
code.
pay our taxes. The taxes would be paid and the rebate would be provided in advance.
Why is that something's being paid up front? Because
Yeah, I mean, but I'm just taking. But this is directly out of 467B in those circumstances. It also deals with overcharges.
Now what did we what did you come up with as the tax implication for us to consider if we adopt Scree and Dree?
So the recommendation by Mr. Lesnick was that we could put anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 in. He wouldn't really expect 19 to be more than 1,500, 2,000.
We're only talking about a couple months of the year, right?
Right. Because you would get credit next year for just, so it goes back to September 1 when the effective date of ETPA is.
Oh.
So in 19, you're only going to get credit for those couple of months. So then in 19, you'll have all of 19.
September 1st or October 1st?
September 1 is what Chuck said, the ETPA.
Actually, let me just.
We didn't even vote till September 5th. I think
said
it was
September.
October 1st. I think it was October 1st.
But I just want to correct one thing.
Right.
The effective date depends upon the date the application is filed by the individual. So in other words, the person has to, in other words, the effective date for SCREE for an individual depends on the day they file their application. So if they file it December 15th, that it goes from December 15th on. In other words, it won't go back to the
Okay.
to the date. So
That's how he explained it to me, so I wasn't sure if they were going to if they were gonna, because we're new and ETPA is new, if they were gonna look at all the leases that were in effect as of September 1st and then give them credit for that, just because it's new, but I don't know the answer to that. So from a budgetary perspective, again, it's a contra revenue, so it would be deducted from the taxes collected. Not
You
much.
said 10,000. That's
Well,
what he
that
said.
would be the max.
Max.
So 5 to 10 would probably be the max ever, but he said really just because you're only talking about a couple of months, that's
Minimal tax implications.
minimal amount of money, and I think that our budget can, for this year, can absorb it. We'll have more data next year.
Oh, once people start applying, you'll have data about how many people. were
Right.
on.
Yeah, I'd just like to remind everybody that we have other, the one that you spoke about, which is an individual who owns a home who's just disabled. Apparently there's there's an opportunity for, I guess, either tax credit or abatement of some kind. We also do this for veterans. We also do this for our firefighters. So this is not something uncommon. The fact is DHCR is going to administer the entire program. And, given the use by, or, given the number of people that have applied for the benefit across Westchester, I can't see it having any large effect in terms of the cost of the program. And I would also say that this is an important benefit for those who want to stay in place, for people who are on fixed income, for people who are disabled, and have fixed incomes. This could be the difference between them staying and living where they are now or having to leave our community. So for that reason, I'm in full support of the proposed law as it has been given to us by Stuart, and I would ask that we go into special legislative session and that we ask for the public hearing.
I concur with Trustee Cobham's sentiments.
I just don't agree with what we just said earlier that it's not for 2 units or that would only, we all laugh, but it's in your draft, so we want that out.
okay, it's part of this. It's part of 467. It's part of 467. Yeah. Oh, this is all modeled on.
Yeah.
We can't get away
It's
from
in
the state law.
467B.
Alright, thank you.
Yeah, it's just
But yes.
it's New York City. It won't happen.
That's the new record.
Nope.
So
Yeah.
what we're doing is voting for a public hearing tonight? Is
Well,
that what you're saying, John?
Yes, that's right. I'm asking that we go into a special legislative session and that we call for the public hearing to be on the 5th of December.
I just want to ask Stuart. You had, when we talked about it, says 50,000 now because that's the state maximum
Right.
income level now. Do you already have included language so that the law doesn't need to be updated? It just
Yes.
reflects whenever.
what,
I
what, it,
didn't
what it
read that.
provides is, and it would be subset. It would be the new section 241-29C, which would say, notwithstanding the foregoing subsections A and B, which deals with both disabled or senior citizen, in the event the maximum allowable incomes established under real property tax law section 467B for dwelling units where the head of a household is a person 62 years of age or older, or a qualified person with a disability is reduced by operation of law or by action of the state legislature to an amount less than $50,000. The maximum allowable incomes under this section shall automatically reduce to said statutory maximum allowable incomes. So it just
Great.
drop down.
Okay. Is there anything else for us to discuss in a work session? Otherwise, we can move into.
Let me just make one point. Should the state increase the number? Because what I just read to you is that it deals with reduction. So, in other words, if the number is raised above 50, then the board could, revise the law, the local law to raise the number up. The provision here is just if it goes low, and that I think is because the way the law is currently written, as of 2020, it will drop down to 29. So if there's an amendment by the state and the governor signs it to raise it to 70,000 or do it by CPI or something like that, this board can always adopt that.
Okay. But so if there's an amendment, say if the governor says, "Oh, you know what, 64 is the number," ours is going to stay at 50, pretty much until we
you
change.
it.
Okay.
In terms of, there's a statute. Well, if the state were to change it, well, the way that 467B is the municipality decides what the maximum income level is. So if the state were to raise it from, let's say, 60 to 70, which is one of the proposals, and you're at 50, if you wanted to raise it, you could, but it would take a resolution by the board to amend the ordinance, the local law to kick it up. What this does is that if it drops, because the state has dropped it based upon the ordinance, you don't have to act. It automatically drops.
Okay. I mean, we could change the language so that it would be more generous of us to change the language and just say that whatever the
You could do
maximum that's set by the state, that's what will take hold in Ossining. Because if somebody wants to raise it to 70,000 and that's a piece of legislation that's being considered, would this board want to automatically just have it raised to 70,000 rather than depend on a future board agreeing to do that?
I would be fine with that.
So,
More people would be eligible for the program.
pardon? Yeah, I just to have it automatically, our income level automatically. You're against that? So weird. So weird. Bizarro world.
Listen.
I actually like Screen Tree. I like this program.
yeah,
I like
so,
this
I
program
mean-
much better than ETPA. You just can't have one without the other.
Whatever the board decides.
No, no, sir. You are.
So here's
Dodge this bullet,
so,
man.
so here's the thing. I just thinking about our community, right? 50 seems like a decent number. I do understand in other communities where 70, makes sense. I just don't know whether we're there yet. Like I think, if for a future board, I would that's something that a future board could make a decision. Like just looking at the numbers, like we don't have data yet. If everybody here wants to go with whatever the state decides, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. But 70,
You think that number is a New York City number?
I really do.
Not a Westchester.
I don't think. Yeah, I think that's a New York City number. That's just me personally. But if everybody's like hunky
You have
dory,
spent a lot more time thinking about this than me. I was just thinking.
Listen,
I was trying to make it easy. And
I understand.
but-
I understand. But I'm not gonna. Hey, but 50 really makes sense. Just from what I know, 50 makes sense for the area. I think 70 is a New York City number, hands down. So I understand why there's legislation for that, but if everybody wants to just make it whatever the New York State law says, I'm okay with that. But I wasn't gonna necessarily.
I'll lead that parade. Huh? You're welcome.
Well, I mean, I would be comfortable with, making the language so that, whatever the state decides, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I don't know, Trustee Herrera? Well,
The
listen, we don't have a
program
choice.
is run by New York State.
We don't have a choice anyway.
We've already put the trust in them.
This is state law. We're basically adopting, a state, regulation. So it's, whatever they're doing in Albany is what they're doing. So we don't really have a choice, but certainly the upside couldn't be a bad thing. So,
Something to keep in mind when they determine this, the income threshold, is it's not just the individual who qualifies. It's the income of everyone in that household. So if they live with a grandchild, if they have a 52-year-old spouse, that all of their incomes
And that
determine
is-
either
and
the
that-
50 or the
yeah,
70.
And that if the 62-year-old plus senior dies, that person, other family members can transfer. You know, they don't, don't automatically lose SCREE if basically the household. No, you don't. There's a transfer provision in here that there's a certain application. Yes.
Indefinitely?
No, not indefinitely, but there are provisions that deal with that. I think there's a limited period of time, but it does have that in here. So I'm trying to.
So I'll throw my budgetary comment in since we're talking about budget. The average income in Ossining is $60,000, right? So if they do change it to 70 and the average is 60 and 50% of your people are below that, again, they have to live in an ETPA project. I get that, but there's
So-
a budgetary impact to this too, because this is an expense for us.
So thank you for speaking, because I'm sorry, when I think of screen injury, I'm thinking senior citizen, one lady, you know, in her hot water flat. With respects to actual family incomes, you know, whatever the state decides, because you know it could be a family. Those could be a lot of families. I mean, everyone is not, you know.
You're changing your mind now.
Yeah.
Good.
But Debbie's also making an interesting point because now, you know, if the median income in Ossining is
Lower.
60,000, and I don't think that the most likely. I don't think that the most likely scenario is that the 70,000. I doubt that that's where it's going to go. That seems like the least likely scenario. I think the smartest thing for them to do would be tie it to the CPI, but that's, the smartest isn't always what ends up in the legislation. I don't think it's likely that it's going to be set. I think it's highly unlikely that it would be higher than the median income in Ossining, but we don't know.
So you're suggesting what after all this to go with whatever the state?
That was that was what I proposed.
I concur.
I proposed and convinced you. Wow. Red letter day.
So if that's the sense, the language then in that paragraph I read before could simply be changed that notwithstanding the foregoing, in the event the maximum allowable incomes is reduced or increased by operation of law or by action of the state legislature to an amount less than or more than $50,000, the maximum allowable incomes shall automatically be reduced or increased to said statutory maximum allowable incomes. That would basically cover both ends of the spectrum.
So if we call for the public hearing on the 5th, we will post this online for everybody to see with that amended language.
With that amended language, correct.
All right, is there anything else on the work session agenda for us to discuss?
Not for work session, there is not. Could we have a motion to adjourn work session and go into a brief legislative session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now in the brief legislative session, I have a resolution calling for a public hearing. Resolved that the Board of Trustees of the Village of Ossining hereby calls for a public hearing to take place at 7:30 p.m. on December 5, 2018 at the Birdsall Fagan Police Court Facility, 86-88 Spring Street, Ossining, New York, or as soon thereafter as the matter may be heard to consider proposed local law 11-2018 titled a local law amending chapter 241 taxation of the Village of Ossining Code, which local law proposes to add Article 6, tax abatement for rent-controlled and rent-regulated property occupied by certain senior citizens or persons with disabilities. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Comments from the board? Okay, I'm going to comment before we vote. I voted against ETPA, though I believe that its intent is the right thing for Ossining, which is to protect tenants and to keep the community affordable. That's why we started talking about it 4 years ago, before I was even mayor. And I came to realize that I don't think ETPA is overall the right program for Ossining. I think there are too many downsides, but we've belabored that. As long as we're going to have ETPA, I think screen injury are programs that do exactly what I would like our community to be able to do, which is to help keep the community affordable for people who are least able to be able to increase their incomes to be able to stay here, which is seniors and disabled people who have already demonstrated a limited income level. So I'm going to be able to vote yes on this. Yeah. Who would have thought? As long as we have ETPA, I want to have screen and Dree. Well, you never asked my opinion on this one, did you?
I kind of knew that one.
Did you? Okay.
I just wanted to add again, these two programs really supplement on the original intent of the passage of the ETPA about retaining. So here the mainly retaining our seniors that otherwise get priced out, and really giving an opportunity for those with disabilities. And it's really, to my knowledge, at least in the past decade, not something that has a local law from a municipal standpoint that's focusing on housing costs and retaining and allowing people to age in place. So it's great that it's being done by this board.
Comments? All right.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Don't we have to do a voice vote?
Well, no, it's just for
Oh,
confirmation.
just calling for a public
Okay.
hearing. I'm jumping ahead.
Later.
Oh, well, we can definitely support a public hearing. All right.
Opposed?
All right.
Do we have a motion to adjourn the work session and move into executive session for matters of personnel and litigation?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. With that, thank you very much. There will be no village board meeting next week. Happy Thanksgiving. We will be back in this room 2 weeks from now, November 28th, for a work session. And then we already have an exciting, I guess we just have one item for a public hearing on December 5th and one that we almost hadn't talked about for an hour. Okay, this meeting is adjourned. Have a executive session. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving.